Hello everyone, welcome back to Galaxy of Fission. It has been a long time since I've had this show on the air. I'd like to introduce my guest here today, Andrew Costa. It's good to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. And since we're back from the dead, we want to go ahead and just kick right back into a subject. Today we're talking some Mandalorian, and specifically the Baby Yoda, the origins. What's up with this character, and where's he come from? What is he? You know, what's going on with the story? Some theories. I'm sure we're going to hear about it later in Season 2 as we get into that next fall. But, you know, until then, we can have some fun with some theories, right?
And just for technicality's sake, I hear that calling it Baby Yoda is controversial in some circles. The child is LucasArts' preferred nomenclature.
I'd imagine. But
if you tell me Baby Yoda, I know who you're talking about. Kathleen Kennedy might not play it so cool, just so you know. And she'll fire anybody.
Absolutely anybody. So. Even people who don't work for her, like us. Yeah. For some reason, I got fired by Kathleen Kennedy. I didn't even know I worked for her.
I'm fairly certain my restraining order's in the mail.
That is it, yeah. It'll continue being in the mail. But for the sake of brevity, we'll call this and understanding Baby Yoda, because it's like when you say, hey, have you heard about the child? I got the new child at Walmart or whatever. And they're like, the child? You bought a child from Walmart? And then they're like, what? And
then you're not just on Kathleen Kennedy's list.
Exactly.
Then there are some federal agencies that get involved. Right?
What does you mean by the child? Yes. So the Baby Yoda, you know, made its appearance here in The Mandalorian. We've got this new show on Disney Plus, and for some of us, it was probably the reason we got Disney Plus maybe in the first place. Mostly that was my reason. At the same time, I've got 5 kids, so Disney Plus is definitely something that they were going to get a lot of mileage out of. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I was really interested that all the Star Wars content would be in one place at the same time. But having 3 kids, and we are Disney fans at the house. We've been a couple times, so. I didn't know Disney owned some of the other properties that they did. Like, was it Touchstone that did Splash?
Yeah, they do own some of those. The films that you wouldn't think, that's not like While You Were Sleeping, Sandra Bullock, you know, films like that.
I grew up watching, you know, the Swiss Family Robinson.
Right, yeah.
You know, and so obviously I wanted the Star Wars content. Obviously my kids wanted Ariel, but then, you know, revisiting some of these things from my childhood, Escape from Witch Mountain and Swiss Family and those things. So overall, I am a satisfied customer at $7 a month. You know, if it follows if it follows Netflix up to $15, $16, $17, $18 a month, then we might start to say, okay, kids, Netflix or Disney Plus. But at the moment, I'm getting my money's worth. I was already a Hulu subscriber. Yeah. So, you know, now I've got the package, the Hulu Disney thing.
Right.
So.
And on top of getting Mandalorian, we got the Clone Wars, and like you said, all the Star Wars content, Rebels. The Clone Wars has been coming out with its later episodes, and now it's, you know, kind of wrapped things up nicely, neatly. Did you find...
I have not finished Clone Wars, but I hear that they're going to keep producing more Clone Wars and get right up to the opening of Rebels. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll definitely see. I've always been a fan of Star Wars, most of its content. Not so much the comics and the extended universe thing. Not so much the video games. I like some of them, but mostly the films and the television shows, even the holiday special, because, you know, there's always a place in our heart.
I tried to watch it, and I couldn't. If you're a diehard fan and you're like, you shouldn't be on this show, I should. That's probably true. Yeah. I couldn't get through all of these.
I think I mentioned to you there's a little nod to the holiday special in Mandalorian, right?
Oh, with Life Day?
Life Day, yeah. That character that the Mando is the bounty. He's got the bounty on the first character. He's got the bounty on there, and talking about getting home in time for Life Day, and you're just like, oh no, you're kidding me. They're actually considering going there. So, you know, little nod to the viewers. Also a nod to the viewers was the stormtroopers that can't aim. You know, trying to fire, and both of them. But let's talk about the child. You know, the child when you first saw, the little head peek out and all of that, first reactions?
All right, so this has been some months, but I am remembering that Yoda, being so old, was a little bit creepy, and this child was much warmer. Like, this was much more, like a puppy, where Yoda was a little more lizard-like. Like, I don't know that I would have wanted to cuddle Yoda, but
Right.
but baby Yoda, or the child, was not as disconcerting at first look, and immediately compassionate. Like immediately, like, okay, I care about this character's well-being. Like that rhinoceros that the child takes down later on. I'm like, well, I didn't care about,
Right.
Go ahead and let that thing die. It doesn't matter to me. So, very compassionate character, was immediately invested in them as a hero, not as a villain. What about you?
Yeah, it was reminding me of a couple of different other films. Willow, which is also on Disney Plus, by the way.
Really?
Yeah. Do you remember Willow? Yeah.
I still have nightmares about Willow.
I know, yeah. It was because of the fact that this child comes into his life. He doesn't want it at first, and then he grows to love it.
Yeah.
And of course, they go on a journey together, and the child, in that one, is supposed to grow up to be someone special. This child, of course, being vulnerable, but at the same time having the force powers, a little different. But that was one of the things that it reminded me of. The other is Gizmo from Gremlins, of course. Just this idea of this creature, and then offset that creature with the other creatures, the gremlins, which, pure evil, and then soft and cuddly and cute and all that kind of thing. And the ears, of course, just, it was Gizmo and Willow somehow put together. So I kind of found that kind of I was reminded of that in some ways.
So, part of our discussion is going to be the origin of the child.
Yes.
The question, I think it's okay to ask the question, does this style of fiction demand that we sort out the origin, right? Is that something we need to, professionally, I'm a pastor, so origins and of biblical literature and stuff like that,
right,
obviously is going to be a passion of mine. This character, what's their background, what's their culture, and those sorts of questions. But does all fiction demand that? I have some. Yeah. I'm super excited to talk about the origin of the child, but at the end of the day, if Lucasfilm never gives us that origin, does it detract from the universe? Did we need Rey to have the origin that she did? And that can be another episode. But is it okay for characters to be origin-less?
Yeah.
I remember when Episode 8 came out, and people were like, oh, that the kid who picks up the broomstick with the Force at the end of the movie, is he Luke's child? All of a sudden there were articles like, where's this kid from? And I'm like, I don't think the fiction was at all asking that. I thought the fiction was saying there is a potential for new Jedi out in the galaxy. There is a reach, or there is a potential new audience for the Rebel Alliance to gain that they have not yet gotten yet, and this child represents that.
Yeah, I would agree.
That's at the end of Episode 8.
Yeah.
So this child, let's talk through the origin story. But if we never get the origin story, I don't know that The Mandalorian is worse for it. Right. I think it's an absolutely amazing series.
Yeah.
And so I don't think it's worse for it.
Well, and you're right in that. I would agree that sometimes telling the origin ruins it for us, doesn't it? Darth Vader was so much more mysterious and scary before we found out he was this little kid on Tatooine, right?
Yippee!
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not saying that metachlorians ruined anything, but come on, metachlorians ruined, right?
Yeah. So some of the theories that are out there, I've heard this one, and I think it's been kind of just tossed in the wind, but still maybe something there. Clone of Yoda, that Yoda somehow ended up getting cloned. And how much stock I put in this theory. It'd be interesting, and believe it or not, I think it might be the safe passage for Disney to go, is to say, well, he's just a clone, end of story, of Yoda. So he is Baby Yoda, just not a child of Yoda. He is just like Jango Fett and Boba Fett. Boba was a clone child of Jango, and cloning's obviously a part of Star Wars lore. So what's your kind of thoughts about the clone baby?
Yeah, I'm wondering, because Yaddle exists, and Yaddle's a female of Yoda's same species who is on the Jedi Council as well. Because Yaddle exists, we've created a world where Yoda is not the only Jedi of his species, and he's not the only member of his species left, right? He's not the last Mohican.
Yeah.
So because there's a universe where there are multiple Jedi of that species, to introduce a Force-sensitive child from that species, for me, does not automatically scream clone. For me, it says that a member of this species who is force sensitive is now accessible.
Yeah.
And so the question I asked was not is this a clone? Is where is this species from?
Right.
Where's their home planet? Are they super secretive? Is that why there's only 3 in the universe thus far?
Possible, yeah.
So, I never jumped onto the clone theory. Now, if it is a clone, that's perfectly within the canon of Star Wars lore that it would be a clone. The problem I think you would have with having a clone is, okay, we didn't get a hold of this child. Let's clone some other,
Yeah.
If you can make a clone out of anything, then why do you need this? I guess you've gestated this one 50 years. So.
Right. I guess it's too easy, isn't it, in storytelling to just say that's a clone. That's an exact duplicate of something we've already had or someone we've already had. Obviously, the Chancellor Palpatine got the clone treatment. Not as ripe as a clone should be, as the clone stormtroopers, the clone troopers were.
Did you read Timothy Zahn's Heir to the Empire?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so Admiral Thrawn was actually a Timothy Zahn invention. So the extended universe, the books that make up Star Wars, for anybody who doesn't know this, and there's probably experts who are way better at this than I am, but just for the few of you who wandered on, before the prequels were made, there's all these books called the extended universe that have now been taken out of canon and now are called legends. But Star Wars currently is borrowing a lot from legends, including Timothy Zahn's storyline from the Heir to the Empire series.
Okay.
Now, the Heir to the Empire series, there's a lizard. I don't remember his name, but it makes this force bubble where the force is not active. And so what they're doing with it is they're making clones faster because the reason species take so long to gestate and grow up is because the force is so powerful and pervasive that you have to slowly grow with enough strength to exist while the force is pressing in on you from all sides.
Okay.
And so in the Heir to the Empire series, they're using these lizards to say, with this force bubble now, we can make clone troopers faster because they don't have to withstand the force.
Okay.
And so the fact that Palpatine's clone was not quite ripe, I think, for me, I saw the nod to the Heir to the Empire. Like, it's really hard to make clones because the force is pressing in on every side of every creature, and to build out clones against that is a very nuanced process. So that whoever those guys at Camino were that were able to do that, obviously they had unlocked some amount of magic to get there.
Yeah, and when it comes down to like the idea that we have a doctor in the episode 2, I believe 1 and 2 of The Mandalorian, that is trying to protect the child. Interestingly, I just found this out today. His little badge there. Have you seen that? Yeah, this
I don't remember the badge, but tell me
about it. The little badge is it's just a symbol, and it looks like the letters I and L. And if you actually look at that symbol, it's kind of hidden in there. And the clone troopers, when they're children and they're going through their learning, on their computer desks and all that, and they're being grown extra fast, of course, the little clone, younglings, I guess, they have that same badge in episode 2, Attack the Clones. So it's there's some sort of connection that Dr. Pershing is his name, that he has to Camino. What that connection is hard to tell because
now that would booster the clone theory.
Sure.
More.
Or is he's either already a clone, he's 50 years old, and so obviously they've invested this much time and effort into him.
Or are they going to clone him?
Or, exactly, that he is, the latest of his kind, the only surviving maybe at this point since Yoda's dead, and we assume
Yaddle does die 24 years before the first Death Star.
Okay.
According to Wikipedia.
Gotcha.
By the way, I'm not an expert in Yaddle. I was just on Wikipedia like 90 seconds before we hit play. So
right.
Gotcha. For all you Yaddle mega fans, please write in, tell us what we got wrong. So
yeah, there's a lot of things that could just spawn out of that Yaddle theory, and I'm subscribing.
That's another theory about the origins of the child. Is it's an offspring between Yoda and Yaddle.
Correct.
Yeah. Now I have reasons why I'm bothered by there are a lot of theories about Jedi offspring. Mm-hmm. Now I don't love those theories, but when you hear a Jedi offspring theory, how do you land on it? How does that sit with you?
Well, they're not supposed to. They're not supposed to have the relationships. They're not supposed to be married, and they're not supposed to be having children. So, but it seems like that rule book gets thrown out all the time. So, go right ahead, right?
Yeah. For a while, because it was like maybe Rey's Obi-Wan's daughter. I'm like, Obi-Wan was an extremely virtuous Jedi. There were less virtuous Jedi.
Right.
Dave Filoni even talks about Qui-Gon, having been very different than his fellow council members and being willing to have attachment and to love in a way other council members were not willing to love and have attachment.
Right.
So, a Qui-Gon offspring is actually, if you live in Dave Filoni's version of the Star Wars universe,
right.
A Qui-Gon offspring is
that would have been interesting, yeah.
Would have been more feasible, but I feel like the Yoda offspring, the Kenobi offspring, those theories don't land with me very well. Curiously, Luke Skywalker in the Legends does get married, and I don't think he has offspring because one of Solo's kids goes dark and kills his wife before they have any offspring. Well, but that's Legends. That's not this episode.
Yeah.
But I'm with you that if they really are the monks, the monastics,
right, that they're supposed to be
of the Jedi universe, then to imagine all of them have secret mistresses is A, really cynical, and B, thrusts our hypersexual, cultural baggage onto the Star Wars universe.
And in a lot of ways, you're trying to say, well, Star Wars, is it becoming a soap opera? It's like who's fathered this child, and
from space opera to soap opera.
Yeah, and that's why I guess the Rey connection, where does Rey come from, and all that. Everyone had all these theories, between Luke, Palpatine, Kenobi, she's a this, she's a that, and all of these things. Well, it's obviously because we kind of were drawn into that idea that the soap opera and sci-fi met when Vader said, "I'm your father." So I guess we are kind of always looking for that. Who's the next father that we're going to be like, oh, I couldn't believe it, or I called it,
Yeah, when are we going to start accusing people of being Mace Windu's offspring?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Of course, there's the obvious distinction with Mace that he's left-handed. I'm kidding. He's black, so whatever offspring he has is going to at least have to have some sort of mixed race ness to him.
But again, all these Jedi apparently not following all the rules, and even Kenobi, they thought, the Mandalorian, queen that he had a relationship in the past with, that possibly something happened out of that relationship, but then she died. So obviously, it wouldn't have been later in both of their lives that they would have spawned a child in Rey. That would have, she would have been too young. She would be too old in the sequel trilogy. So all of these things we're kind of always drawn into them into these relationships. Maybe the origin of this child is less than spectacular, but it's not about the origin, but maybe about what's going to happen next.
The question I asked when you asked me about first impressions, I'm like, oh, maybe what they're setting up here is all of Yoda's kind are Force capable. Mm-hmm. And that might be true, might not be. I've only now started rewatching Clone Wars, and there was an episode where a member of Jar Jar species, another Gungan, was a Force-sensitive child that the Jedi had their eye on as a possible youngling, and they were kidnapped. They were kidnapped by some sort of bounty hunter doing the work of the Emperor or of Darth Sidious. Mm-hmm. And the Jedi were able to rescue him and bring him back to the mom, and the mom's like, the Jedi promised me I would raise a child till it was 3, and then it would become a youngling.
I gotcha. Okay.
So
this species, yeah.
So even Jar Jar's species can
be Force sensitive.
Yeah, Force sensitive to the point where they can enter as a Padawan.
Yeah.
So all that's a long way to say. At first, I was like, oh, maybe they're suggesting that all of these this species are force capable.
Right.
But I was like, well,
from birth.
Yeah, they don't have to be. They don't all have to be force capable. I mean, they just be.
Yeah.
Yoda, Yaddle, and now the child.
Yeah, and that's very possible that they're just that they have more of a connection with the Force from birth, and that's maybe just part of their genetic makeup. The other thing might be that this still could be a Yoda offspring, but we don't know how Yoda's offspring are birthed. We don't know that they even need to have,
Well, remember with the Metachlorians that Anakin was a virgin.
Virgin birth, yes.
And by the way, my peoples, that we call ourselves Christians, of course you're part of the tribe too, we're all about virgin birth. We're not anti-virgin birth, but certainly I didn't know that worked in this universe.
Right.
But
this is an alien, so we're we can make the universe of this origin of this and the genetic makeup of this baby. There was another film actually called Enemy Mine, and it was this alien and the human who crash land on the planet. They're mortal enemies, but they have to survive together, and the human and the alien become friends through survival, and the male, or what we think is a male of the alien, is actually pregnant and is going to produce a child. And it's like, that's how his alien, and he's not a he's both sexes in one, and so he reproduces that way, and so he births the child, dies in childbirth. Now the human has to raise the child alien baby as a result of that, and so he makes it his own, and it's a really good story. But they have that idea of that alien. We can write the genetic makeup of that any way we can. Star Trek's been doing it forever, of course. Why not Star Wars? This could be that's the way that they reproduce, and so Yoda's still virtuous.
It is the way.
It is the way, yeah. And so there he is, yeah. Now, what would be the genetic engineering? There was a little bit of talk in, I believe it was episode 7 of Mandalorian, of Queel, the Ugnaught, talking about, I've been in the genetic engineering, section of the Empire and all that, and this doesn't seem like genetic engineering. So I guess he was kind of throwing, a wrench in that theory anyways, that it's just not what they would genetically engineer. It just doesn't seem right for the Imperial.
And in your mind, is the genetic engineering stream different than the clone stream?
Basically the same.
I feel like it would be the same stream there.
Basically, yes.
And so, because I reject the cloning theory, not out of massive research, I just didn't think the fiction, the storytelling fiction was pointing that way.
Mm-hmm.
Because these aren't scientific documents. This is a fiction. And so some of it is when you ask these questions. What is the fiction demand, and what is it pointing at? And so, because I thought the fiction wasn't necessarily pointing towards cloning, and then you hear, this doesn't seem like imperial genetic engineering, I'm like, I think we could take that one off the table.
Yeah. I just mentioned it because he did, especially.
And I don't remember that scene, so you're...
Yeah, it was when they were introduced to IG-11, and they're talking to Queel about, of course, coming with them to pull off their little heist to end this hunt for the child, which turned into actually a somewhat bigger hunt. Yeah. But I guess they don't have all the bounty hunters now after them. They've just got Moff Gideon after them. Before we get to Moff Gideon, what do you think? The scientist, when he was, I think it was episode 2. The Sin, which was Mando rescuing him. What do you think was going on there in that little lab with the child on the, laying down unconscious and the.
Yeah, and so I thought they were drawing blood to get DNA to start cloning.
Okay.
Not that he already had been a clone, but this is a clonable creature.
Correct. And that's why maybe the Dead or Alive mission that Mando had would have been okay, because as long as you bring back some genetic material, I can still make my clone, even if you bring a sample of his hair. But Dead or Alive, preferred alive, but...
Yeah, and I wonder if the reason dead is because if this child became part of a new Jedi Order, that's a bigger problem than the Empire just not having access to it.
And if this underground empire that's going on is doing this kind of work that would kind of alert everyone to what's been going on. Even the stormtroopers didn't have a clue of what this was, so obviously it's not in the ranks of them. And there's Moff Gideon. Let's bring him into the picture. What do you think?
Which one is Moff Gideon?
Moff Gideon's at the episode 7 and 8. He's the one who shows up in the TIE fighter.
He's the black gentleman.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
he has the black saber.
Dark saber. Yes.
Okay. So there's a young man who's part of the church I attend. His name's Jensen, and so I was asking Jensen, who's much more researched and studied than I am about the black saber, and so he was able to give me a few details. And I'm struggling to bring him to mind. Do you have a quick black saber origin story that'll help the folks like me who I saw the black saber? I'm like, how did that guy get a lightsaber?
Right.
Is he a former Sith Inquisitor or something like that?
Right. So to get the long and short of it, you can do a whole half an hour on just the dark saber by itself. But the origins of the dark saber was the first Mandalorian, like 1,000 years ago. The first Mandalorian Jedi had built the dark saber. And so, as it was passed down the generations, it became the symbol of Mandalorian strength. And so they even fought the Jedi. The Mandalorians and the Jedi were at war with one another at one point, and they used the dark saber to rally, of course, the Mandalorians to fighting the Jedi. They lost ultimately. Later, we have the appearance of the dark saber in the Clone Wars. Darth Maul gets a hold of it because he takes over Mandalore for a while. It keeps getting passed back and forth between them. Eventually, the Empire takes over after the Order 66, of course, and the dark saber is in the hands of Darth Maul, and then it's.
So here's the question: Is the dark saber at the end of 8 an Easter egg? For the nerd among us who's just like, oh, it's a dark saber.
Yeah.
Or is it a storytelling device that is supposed to help us discover Moff Gideon's origins? Are we supposed to see the dark saber and say, oh, that's where he's from?
And we're getting a little of that because he was obviously at the siege where Mandalore was being invaded, and the Mandalorians came to that planet and saved Din Djarin, of course, as a young child, and that's why he's connected to the Mandalorians. They're not a race; they are a creed. So anyone can be a Mandalorian. You could have a Wookiee, I guess, in the Mandalorian outfit with the
be a lot of armor.
Yeah,
a lot of armor.
It'll be fur just coming out of it, but so out of that Beskar, ow, it's all getting caught up into it. And so you could be anyone and be a Mandalorian, so as long as you just don't reveal your identity, I guess. The new rules are kind of being written for the Mandalorians because we saw Sabine Wren in Rebels take her helmet off all the time. I mean, most of the time she doesn't have it on. And the other Rebels, and so the Darksaber's in Rebels as well, Clone Wars.
And it makes... And I heard since the release of The Mandalorian, now they're saying, Boba Fett was not a Mandalorian. He had killed a Mandalorian and taken his armor, and that's why he was willing to have his mask off in parts of Episode 2. Oh,
really? Okay, so
and so
Jango Fett becoming Boba Fett. Yes, yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah,
and so I think as they're writing the rules of the Mandalorian in this series, it's meaning that you're having to go back and rewrite, close up plot holes.
Yeah. No, I get it. Yeah, it's not maybe necessarily retconning to a point. It's trying to write the rules to get that obviously out. If you've already had your helmet off, well, I guess the cat's out of the bag. You gotta just live with it.
And TV has different rules than movies.
Right.
Movies have in a 2.5 hour medium. Movies used to be 1.5 hours. So let's go 1.5 hour, 2 hour medium. Every detail is important, and every detail needs to move along the story. Television that goes 5, 6, 7 seasons, they'll drop important details about a character because it's not working, and they say, okay, well, so I used to watch a show called Parenthood.
Right, yeah.
And every once in a while in the show Parenthood, they would deal with aspects of religion, the religious faith of the characters. And very often, people would completely 180 on religious beliefs that they had in other episodes, not because I think they've evolved from religious faith, but it's just like, we don't want that to be part of the character because it doesn't serve our story 3 seasons later.
Right.
Who's paying that close of attention anyway? So let's give them a new narrative. And so, if they create this whole new creed around the Mandalorians, TV is much more quickly to say like that detail is no longer important.
Right.
Anybody who watched Saved by the Bell, Zach Morris had 2 different guys play his dad in the 7 seasons of
was it a problem with anyone?
Yeah, like did anybody care that much? And so
I'd assume in a lot of ways, this can take that idea of the Darksaber, even the fact that it's made appearances in other shows, and say, look, he's been on Mandalore. It's part of the spoils of what he's taken, because obviously the Imperials do that all the time.
So do you think it's a spoil, or do you think he was formerly a Mandalorian?
Good question.
Because I thought that was when somebody told me the black saber was a Mandalorian weapon. Before I knew anything else about it, I was like, "Oh, this guy must have been a Mandalorian who got caught up into the Imperial system, and
very possible
is now serving. Is now high up in the Empire and serving as part of the Empire, but he's keeping his old Mandalorian toys."
Yeah. Very possible. That'd be an interesting story to go along that way. So, I guess even more recent origin is how did, he get kidnapped from the Imperials to wherever he was, surrounded by everyone, where IG-11 and Din had to go in and save him. So what happened there?
And I would say that was just a fiction plot hole that they weren't going to deal with.
Maybe.
Like maybe there's a story that gets you there, but it just felt like, let's create a world where a child's in trouble. How's the child? Don't worry. If there's a season 2, maybe we'll stuff something in there. But like, you already have he's already looking for the child on behalf of the Guild, who's working on behalf of the Empire.
Empire, yes.
With no knowledge from the New Republic. Mm-hmm. So you can complexify the universe and add a 4th group that is not the Empire, is not the Guild, is not the New Republic. Are you going to give them an origin story? Are you going to waste ink and paper on a series that has typically been about the Empire versus the New Republic?
Yeah.
And folks like the Mandalorian having to decide, whose ends are he going to serve?
Yeah, possible. I guess I wanted to less know about the characters, more about the means. What was it that possibly was it the New Republic that sent in people to get this? Is there some rogue Jedi out there, for instance? Apparently when we keep saying last Jedi, I'm the last of the Jedis and stuff. Well, actually, no. It seems like there's still a couple of them, floating about there.
Ahsoka Tano's somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, there's always some, floater of a force wielder even that's out there. So maybe it was some rogue group of whatevers that had sent a mission in to save the child. Don't know.
It is a plot hole that after the Mandalorian kills all those folks and gets the child, there's no consequences.
Correct.
There's no follow-up mission to try and get the child back.
You can close that story quickly. Yeah.
But I think the story is well served by that plot hole.
Yeah.
And so you just as a person who's okay watching a fiction and saying like, the fiction just needs that right now. Let's just let the fiction have that.
Yeah.
But Star Wars fans have always been, excited about the story behind the story behind the story. Like the origin of Han Solo's blaster in the movie Solo. Like for some people, that was immensely satisfying.
Yeah.
So you're asking a question that if they answer, that there'll be a whole subset of people who are like, I couldn't sleep without knowing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think my life could have gone on without knowing that origin story, kind of thing. One last thing, and we'll close up thing, is the force powers for the baby, for the child, for what all he can and can't do so far. What do we know? And, there's obviously one kind of encompassing thing about his force powers is that they exhaust him. That there is a reason, possibly his age, possibly his maybe unfamiliarity with the force. He's using it and it's draining him. But what's your kind of take on some of these things?
Ooh, yeah, that's
Force powers.
That's a good question because is Luke winded in Episode 5 when he tries to lift the X-wing and he's unsuccessful?
I'm wondering if he's winded in a mental way, not a physical way, but yeah,
right,
mental
right.
way.
But it was
drained.
It was exhausting for him to try, and then Yoda's able to do it.
So with ease,
with ease. So yeah, I wonder if as you're learning to use the Force,
it's a sharpening skill.
Right.
Yeah, once you've mastered it, it's just like riding a bike, So it's no problem for a master like Yoda, but someone who's a novice like Luke.
And so I wonder if it's like weightlifting, where like, when you first go to bench press 45 pounds, you're winded at the end.
Yeah.
But eventually you can bench press 200 pounds and the 45 isn't so hard anymore.
Exactly.
Or is it, when you have the Force, mass and matters less and less.
Mm-hmm.
So the size of the object you can move becomes inconsequential because mass and matter are no longer are no longer in your thinking. So for this child who's new to the Force, the mass and the matter of that charging rhino, I don't remember the name of the creature.
Yeah, the Mudhorn, yes.
The Mudhorn. The mass and matter of the Mudhorn matter quite a bit, but eventually it'll be mass and matter done. Or will it just be like, oh, I lift bigger things than you.
Right.
This is no problem.
And so exhausting him, some things completely exhaust him. The healing power didn't seem to be too bad. He even had the Force choke, at one point. He was interrupted before passing out, I guess, so maybe that didn't drain him as much, but definitely lifting the Mudhorn, really put him out, stopping the fire and all of that. That was, I guess there's exponentially more strength in the Force that you would need to stop that. Kanan Jarrus, I mean, you've seen Rebels, how it kind of ends where he's holding back fire, and how that, that would be the end of him because that's all he has. Or Luke, of course, Last Jedi, exhausting himself in the Force, doing his projection, of him fighting on a distant world. So I guess in some ways, using the Force is exhausting to a point. Honing your skills gets you better at it, and this child is kind of dabbling in maybe something he doesn't quite even understand, but has that ability. And so there's rules. There's rules in place, obviously, which is actually a good thing because if we start breaking those rules in some ways when it comes to this power, well, why can't he just do this all the time? To do the magic hand wavy thing, which I love that line, because it's like the viewer's asking that too. Yeah, it's like, he's still exhausted.
When Rey catches that ship in midair with the Force, it's like, oh, you've opened up some doors there.
Right.
Now I'd never played the video game, but apparently in a video game where you become a Jedi, you pull a starship out of the sky using the Force.
Oh, okay.
And so it had some precedent in the Star Wars universe.
Gotcha.
That I think was retconned and put in as part of Legends, but
gotcha.
It wasn't a completely novel idea to have Rey pull a starship out of the sky using the Force.
Yeah.
So, but you're right. If you have that ability, if you give a character that ability, why don't they use it all the time?
Yeah.
If you don't know, Nick's other channel is about Godzilla and what's
giant monsters, kaiju.
Kaiju. And one of your big critiques is they almost kill kaijus with certain tactics that fail for reasons outside their control.
Yeah.
But then they never go back to the tactic, which had some success. Like they never retry the tactic when conditions are better. And so
there's always a chance that you could have tried that again with some modification, and it could be successful. Nope, tried it, done with that plan. Go to plan Z, and maybe that one will work.
And so with Force capabilities, I feel it's the same way. Like they'll use a Force capability, and then it's like, oh, I've used that chip, I can't use it again. It's like, right, you can do it twice, right?
Give it another shot, get better at it. Practice makes perfect.
Let's get back on the horse.
Yeah, so I think that's a lot of good questions for us, a lot of good theories for us to get excited about, season 2 of The Mandalorian and seeing new characters that will be introduced. I really care about this series, the characters in it. I think that it did maybe what the films did not do for us, especially the sequel trilogy and the new, Disney, running of the Star Wars, the Lucas films.
You know what it taught us is if you give one storyteller the whole arc, you're going to be happier with the outcome as opposed to switching storytellers mid-arc. And so I think this is a great series. Make 10 seasons, and Disney, you have got my money. But I think the lesson from a business standpoint is give somebody the whole arc, and don't switch them out mid-arc, and you'll be a lot happier with the storytelling outcome. Fans will be much more willing to part with their dollars.
Yeah.
And it'll be a better business decision.
So if you're listening, Kathy, baby,
yeah,
listen up. Creative control. Just keep it in someone's hands so that they have that arc from start to finish. Don't let it be.
Nick and I have day jobs, but we would be willing to put pause on those day jobs to come right for Lucasfilm. So just send a message via Twitter or Facebook, and we will even get to Orlando on our dime. You just let us know. We're in.
Absolutely, we're in. So thank you everyone for joining us for another episode of Galaxy of Fiction. We're going to keep this show going as long as we can, and we'll see what next subject we can talk about on their next episode. So thank you, Andrew, for being here.
It's the way.
Absolutely, it is the way. All right, we'll catch up with you guys later.
So long.